All right, we are so excited. The Reeling Film Festival is going to begin on September 21st, and one of the films that's going to be there, Ganymede, is going to be coming to us on Saturday, September 23rd. Colby Holt and Sam Probst here to chat all about it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Of
Yeah,
course.
thanks,
Thanks for
Rudy.
having us. Appreciate it.
So let's go ahead and talk. You volunteered at the Reeling Film Festival 10 years ago, and now you're getting to have this film here. Talk a little bit about that whole experience.
Yeah, it's funny how full circle the moment it is. It's really awesome. Colby and I started our journey in independent filmmaking around 2013, and I was volunteering for Reeling at that time. And I remember I was tearing tickets for the opening night among a couple other days that I was there. And I remember seeing people file in and out and thinking it'd be really cool to have a film here one day. And here we are 10 years later, and we're bringing our film to our hometown here in Chicago, and we're really proud to showcase it here.
Talk a little bit about the plot and what we can expect in this movie.
Yeah, so Ganymede is about the son of a small town politician who develops feelings for his openly gay classmate and then begins to be stalked by a creature that is increasingly menacing towards him. It's kind of a Southern Gothic horror film that discusses repression, familial pressure, and the ways in which those types of things can manifest in your life.
Let's talk a little bit about that dynamic, Justin. When we get to see at the
Right.
beginning of the movie, because there's so many instances where somebody might be out, and you pretty much know everyone else who's out, and that's your situation. But there's always that one person who might ask you a lot of questions or may know things about you that you're like, this is, I'm getting a
Right.
vibe. I guess we'll say I'm getting a vibe.
Yeah.
Talk about both of you as far as that experience and putting that into the storyline of the movie.
Yeah, I think that if you were someone who was out in high school, you'll have something to relate to. If you're someone who wasn't out in high school, I think you'll have something to relate to. And I think both of those characters that are the leads in the film represent both of those experiences. And I think something interesting about it is that, the idea of being out or being out in high school is giving other people space to be themselves and not necessarily trying to get that other person to come out, but just give them the space and say, hey, here's someone who's walking authentically in themselves down this hallway in high school. And, maybe I can do the same thing.
Yeah. It's funny because you came out in high school. I came out in my early 20s. And I think that is kind of representative of one aspect of the personal touch that we have to it. And we apply ourselves and other life experiences of our world around us to different characters throughout the film. And so I think those aspects helped us to know what is a later life repression aspect contribute, what does a person who's out in high school contribute, and even being openly gay and coming out in the early 2010s versus now is a completely different type of trajectory in some respects. And so we definitely wanted to be able to add some of our own personal aspects, but also introduce it in a world that we live in that's a modern queer society.
And also kind of explore, even just beyond the two leads in the film, how are their families reacting?
Yeah.
Particularly in communities in the South where you may have really diverse views living right next door to each other. How are two different families going to deal with that, and how are they going to deal with the interaction between their sons or daughters or queer children?
Yeah.
And in smaller towns, rural towns, whether the South or not, I think that these divides play out in starker contrast with each other than I think we do here in Chicago or Los Angeles or New York. Your kids go to school together, you're on community boards together, and you have to work with each other. So how does that work?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the Southern Gothic feel.
I'll let Colby speak on the literary sense, but I think from the way of how we wanted to be able to present it visually, we really wanted to capture what the feeling of the South was. We lived there for an entire year prior to having filmed there 2 years later. And Colby grew up in the same town we filmed in. So we were trying to really present what that feeling is. There's a specific sound design that's very true to the Southern environment. There's this feeling of it being really bright and saturated and feeling like you're in this hot, sticky summer environment. And there's just elements of the interiors and the ways that the actors and the production design manifested that we wanted to make sure were true to what was a Southern vibe and a Southern Gothic vibe. But Colby could probably speak more on the Southern Gothic aspect, I would say.
Yeah, sure. I've always been interested in Southern Gothic tales, and writers, Tennessee Williams or Carson McCullers or, William Faulkner, any of them. And so I thought it would be interesting to explore the queer experience through kind of the lens of a Southern Gothic and use all of those fun features that you get in the Southern Gothic to kind of mash that up with a horror film and queer issues and kind of present something that maybe hasn't been seen in that context before, using features like, a strong sense of the past or, the grotesque and, just a very searing atmosphere to kind of explore these issues.
What was it like going back to your hometown to film this? And do you think you had to leave to be able to come and get a new perspective? Like, do you think had you both stayed there or you had met there, could the script have been written, or did you need to give yourself some perspective to get out of there and then come back?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I wrote it when we still lived in Los Angeles. This was right before the pandemic started. We had plans to shoot in 2020, which obviously did not go to chorus. But we ended up during the pandemic moving back to my hometown in Paducah for about 9 months in 2020 before we moved back up here to Chicago. And I can say that I think we made a different film having gone back and lived in Kentucky for those 9 months before we shot it. It would be very different to write this film, fly in from Los Angeles and make it. It was like seeing that all of this play out in an election year. June came around in 2020 and pride flags were up, Trump flags were up right next door to each other. And it just became very real that like, this has to be worked on all the time. Neighbors have to come out and look at each other and not, go crazy because of their differences. And so it's kind of like, man, it really gave us a different perspective before we shot.
And I never grew up in the South, so being there for that year was really eye-opening to me in good ways and hard ways and in completely different perspective than having lived in cities for the last 10 years prior to that and having lived in the Midwest, which is a version of the South and the small towns, but the Southern culture having its very specific nuances that are different. And so there was a really, I think, beneficial aspect to perspective that we were allowed by being able to be there for that year and reacquaint with maybe past versions of ourselves or past versions of what society was that we grew up in and bringing that into the movie. It was a really great opportunity because of that, I feel like.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I love where I'm from. And I think that part of this is I wanted to show that there is a different South that is more diverse, that is queer, that are people of color that live there and have lives and establish themselves there. And I think that is overlooked sometimes when we talk about the South in popular culture. Mm-hmm. And so to say that, conservatives or Republicans or people who you perceive as small-minded don't own the region. There is a new South that is diverse and welcoming, and it's right alongside the South that everybody kind of talks about too.
Yeah, and so they're competing against one another, and sometimes and confronting one another sometimes and transforming. And for queer people, hopefully in positive ways by owning the new South. This movie is a part of that process.
And that's what great movies do, is that they bring up conversation. So people who didn't go into the theater together, as they're exiting, might start to strike up a conversation or have conversations with the people they came with, which is what all fantastic theater does, or all fantastic films do.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah, one can definitely hope, and we absolutely agree. I think a conversation is really one of the best things you can do when putting a movie out there.
Saturday, September 23rd. Are you going to be there? Are you going to open the movie Q&A? Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we will be. Colby and I will be there. We'll be introing the film, doing the Q&A process, and there will be a few actors that will be there. The nice thing is that we have an interim agreement with the SAG-AFTRA, and we absolutely support the strike. We are happy that's happening, and our production company is adhering to all requirements as independent filmmakers to be able to do this in solidarity with the strike, and be able to promote in the confines of an independent production.
And so we've left it up to the actors to make a decision on if they want to participate in a Q&A, if they want to attend. And so we think it's a deeply personal decision that every individual actor should make. And we're glad that the Guild has offered us the opportunity to have an interim agreement.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. And then final thing here, talk a little bit about getting that call that you were accepted into the Reeling Film Festival.
Oh, it was awesome. It was funny because we, in a very Chicago manner, were at the bus stop 22 about to go south from Edgewater to Andersonville. And then we got the notification at that time. And it was funny because the whole time, like, we're trying not to talk about it on the bus because we want to like get the info out there, but we were very giddy excited about it. So it was very exciting.
It feels really special, especially to be at our hometown LGBTQ festival and one that has such a storied history and a long legacy. And we just couldn't be more thrilled to bring this to Reeling and for it to be the first place that we're showing it. It just felt very right in our hearts when we got that notification.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really proud to call this our hometown and for it to be playing in its hometown and at Reeling. It's such an honor. We love the festival. We love everything it's done for the past 41 years, and we're really grateful to be part of that legacy.
And a lot of Southerners come to Chicago. You know, we're a big city in this area, and I know plenty of queer Southerners who call this home. And so we think there's going to be an audience for that too.
Absolutely.
100%. Thank you both so much for your time today. ReelingFilmFest.org is where you can go ahead and get tickets to Ganymede or any of the other films that are playing at the Reeling Film Festival. And thank you so much for your time today, and congratulations.
Thanks, Rudy.
Pleasure to meet you and chat with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.